Ladies and gentlemen, look around you for a moment. Feel that electric pulse in the room. It's not just excitement, it's something deeper. Something that says you're here for a reason. You didn't walk into this place by chance. Every struggle, every heartbreak, every moment that seemed impossible has guided you right here, right now. So ask yourself, why? Why have you come this far? Why have you endured the trials that tried to break you? I stand here today to tell you this. God didn't let you suffer for no reason. He saw every tear you shed, every disappointment you faced, every mountain you thought you couldn't climb. He allowed you to feel the sting of suffering, not because He wanted to break you, but because He wanted to bring you to a place of higher understanding, deeper faith, and unwavering resolve. That's a truth that will stand the test of time, because it's not about pain without purpose. It's about triumph through tribulation. Maybe you walked in here tonight carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Perhaps you've lost someone dear, or you're wrestling with guilt and regret, or you're uncertain about your destiny. In those darkest nights, you might have questioned if there was any meaning to your pain at all. Let me tell you, you're not alone. We've all had those nights that felt like they would never end. But you and I both know something else. The mornings come, hope reawakens, and life calls us to stand up again. This very moment, I want you to feel the beating of your heart and realize that every pulse is living proof that you're meant to go further, do better, and shine brighter. This isn't just about you, though. It's about the countless souls who are connected to your journey. Your story might be the key that unlocks someone else's courage. Your experience might become the catalyst for another person's breakthrough. When you stand up and rise above, you're not rising alone. You're carrying others with you. People you may never even meet. Think about that for a moment. Think about the tremendous power living inside you, a power that can ripple through lives for years to come. But before we get to that bright horizon, we need to face the very real question: why does God allow suffering? Why does He let us walk through these thorny paths that cut our feet and wound our spirits? My friends, that's why we're here. Tonight, we're going to dive into 3 powerful truths that shine a light on the path through suffering. We're going to talk about discovering the hidden lessons in hardship, learning to trust God's timing, and stepping up to become the person you're called to be, even in the darkest of valleys. We'll talk about real answers, tangible steps, and transformative insights that can take your struggles and forge them into something miraculous. I know it's not easy. Pain never is. And when we suffer, we often feel isolated, like we're lost in a desert. But I'm here to tell you that you are not abandoned. Your trials are not meaningless. Your tears are not wasted. Each scar you carry is a testament to your strength and a road sign pointing you to a destiny that's bigger than you can imagine. This talk isn't a quick fix or a magic formula. It's an invitation to look at your scars and see a mess stitched into your soul. God is not finished with you yet. So lean in, open your heart, and be prepared to reframe your struggles. Ask yourself, what if my suffering was preparing me for the greatest breakthroughs of my life? What if the pain I endured was a necessary journey so I can learn compassion, resilience, and faith? Keep those questions close, because that's the heartbeat of what we're talking about tonight. It's time to move from questioning your suffering to embracing the lessons within it. It's time to see your pain as a stepping stone, not a stumbling block, because God didn't let you suffer for no reason. And if you dare to believe it, you can turn every tear into triumph, every defeat into determination, and every moment of despair into a brand new beginning. Now, let's dive into the depths of this journey together. Let's discover the hidden lessons that suffering offers, so that by the time we leave here tonight, we know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that every battle, every scar, every uphill climb was part of a divine plan to shape us into who we're meant to be. God didn't let you suffer for no reason, and tonight, we're going to find out exactly why. I want you to hold on to that thought. Embrace it. Let it sink into your soul. Because we're stepping forward now together into the core of what it really means to find purpose in our pain, to trust God in the process, and to rise stronger than ever before. Let's begin. You want to know one of the greatest truths about suffering? It reveals what we're really made of. When life is smooth, when everything goes according to plan, it's easy to assume we've got it all figured out. We walk around believing our character is strong, our faith unshakable, our mindset resilient. But the real test of who we are happens in the fire. Think about gold. It only becomes purer when it's subjected to intense heat. That's what suffering does for us if we let it. Strips away the illusions and uncovers the pure gold inside. But how often do we blame God for the heat? How often do we ask Him to remove us from the furnace rather than refine us in it? Let me share a real story. Years ago, I met a young man who'd lost almost everything he held dear. His business collapsed. His health took a downturn, and his closest friends abandoned him. He was bitter, angry, and saw no point in carrying on. Then, one morning, he decided to do something radical. Instead of resisting the pain, he began to ask, "What am I supposed to learn here?" That single shift in perspective changed everything. Over time, his eyes were open to aspects of his character he never knew needed work: patience, humility, empathy. In his pain, he discovered a capacity to reach out to others with compassion that he'd never shown before. It wasn't about ignoring his wounds. It was about seeing them in a new light. His suffering uncovered the gold in his spirit. It refined him. It led him to serve others more selflessly than ever. And that's what can happen to you. Yet so many of us don't realize the potential in our pain. We push it aside, deny it, numb it with distractions. We run from it. But here's the danger when you run from the pain. You run from the lessons it carries. You might be searching for comfort instead of growth. You might be avoiding the very experiences that are meant to unveil the best parts of who you are. If you never let yourself be tested, how will you know how strong you really are? If you never embrace the challenges that stretch you, how can you discover the depths of your faith? So how do you know if you're letting suffering refine you rather than destroy you? Ask yourself this: am I looking for ways to grow, or am I just waiting to escape the heat? When challenges come, Do I stand still long enough to learn? Or do I dart away at the first sign of discomfort? Reflect on what hurts the most right now. Is it possible that this very thing is shaping a new strength, a new compassion, or a new vision within you? The solution begins with a simple decision. Stop viewing your suffering as a punishment and start seeing it as a refining fire. Here's a practical step. When you wake up in the morning, instead of saying, God, why me? Try saying, God, show me. Show me what needs to be purified. Show me where I'm weak. Show me how I can grow. Then be ready for the answers. They often come through hard work, deeper self-examination, and a willingness to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather hide. But that's where real transformation happens. That's where you break free from old habits, negative mindsets, and destructive patterns that have held you back. It's not easy. You might shed some tears. You might want to quit halfway through. But if you push on, you'll come out with a stronger sense of identity, a deeper understanding of your calling, and a radiant light that only emerges when the heat has burned away. Everything falls. Picture a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble. Each strike looks painful, right? But eventually a masterpiece emerges. The same happens with you. Let the blows of adversity carve you into something that leaves people in awe of the grace and strength God has placed in you. I can tell you this. Once you've been through the fire, you won't be the same person ever again. You'll walk different. You'll speak different. You'll dream different. And that is precisely why God allows suffering. Not because he wants to see you in pain, but because he knows that in the fire, you discover your true self, your capacity to love deeply, to stand courageously, and to persevere under pressure. That is the refining power of suffering. So remember, if you're in a storm right now, if your heart is aching, if the tears won't stop falling, you are in good company. You're in the midst of transformation. You're not being destroyed, you're being refined. And on the other side of this storm, you'll stand with a testimony that will set other people free. God didn't let you suffer for no reason. He's preparing you to shine. And that leads us to our next insight, something that often feels even harder to accept: God's timing. Because if there's one thing that can test our faith more than suffering itself, it's waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for relief, waiting for that glimmer of hope. But there's a reason for that waiting, too. Let's delve into it. Now, let's talk about timing. God's timing. Isn't that something that can drive you crazy? You feel the pain, you cry out for an answer, and then silence. You beg for a breakthrough, for a door to open, for a miracle to unfold, and yet it seems like nothing moves. That silence can be deafening. It can make you question God's love, his presence, even his existence. But I want you to think about this. Sometimes the silence is exactly where God does his deepest work. Sometimes the waiting is not a denial, it's a preparation. I recall a friend who was desperate for a job. He'd been laid off unexpectedly and couldn't pay his bills. His savings were dwindling, and he was at the end of his rope. Every day, he'd pray, God, open a door. And every day he faced a locked gate he couldn't understand. He was faithful, honest, hardworking. Why wouldn't God just bring an opportunity his way? Eventually, the man found a job, but not until months later. In that period of waiting, he learned resourcefulness. He discovered humility. He reconnected with family he'd neglected, and he found that his true calling was different from what he'd pursued all along. When the door finally opened, it led to a career that fulfilled him far more than his old job ever did. The delay wasn't God refusing to act. It was God aligning everything at the perfect moment. It was about letting the man's heart grow and preparing him to handle blessings he wasn't ready for before. Yet, when we're in that waiting room of life, we often feel neglected. We look around, see others moving forward, see them succeeding, and wonder, what about me? That comparison can breed resentment and doubt. It's like standing in a long line while everyone else seems to have a VAPI pass. But here's the truth: God's plan for you is tailor-made. It isn't about what's so, and so next door is receiving. It's about what you need when you need it, and in a way that's designed for your ultimate good. Sometimes, if you received your breakthrough too early, it might actually harm you. A blessing given prematurely can become a curse if your character isn't ready to sustain it. So, how do we handle this sense of endless waiting? First, we confront the reality that impatience can lead us astray. When you jump the gun, you might accept less than God's best for you. You might settle for a relationship that feels comfortable but isn't right. You might grab a job that pays the bills but robs you of purpose. Impatience can make you cling to whatever is in reach, missing out on the masterpiece God is crafting behind the scenes. That's where trust comes in. Trust is more than a feeling. It's a choice to believe that God is working even when you don't see any evidence. It's a daily declaration. I will wait for the right moment, even if I have no clue when that will be. And that trust can be tested to its limits. But each day you choose to trust in the darkness is a day you build spiritual muscles you can't build any other way. Patience isn't passive. It's active faith in motion, refusing to give in to despair, choosing to show up each day and do what you can with what you have. Let's get practical. Ask yourself, what can I do in this waiting season that will prepare me for my next chapter? Maybe you can refine a skill, deepen a relationship, or serve in a capacity you've overlooked. Sometimes God is waiting on you to grow in certain areas before He opens that door. And if you find yourself stuck in self-pity or bitterness because your timeline isn't met, recognize that as an alarm bell. Shake it off. Redirect that energy into becoming the person who'll be ready for that breakthrough when it comes. Remember, God's timing is perfect, even if it feels painfully slow. If you look at major figures in history, biblical or otherwise, you'll notice a pattern. Moses spent years in the desert. Joseph was thrown into prison before he became a ruler. Nelson Mandela endured decades of imprisonment before leading a nation. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was a crucible that shaped them into the leaders they needed to be. And so it can be for you. Your waiting period might not be as dramatic, but it's no less meaningful. It's in this in-between space that your roots grow deeper, your vision grows clearer, and your resilience takes shape. So no matter how long you've been waiting for that change, that answer, that deliverance, know this: God sees you. He hears you. And He's aligning things in ways you cannot begin to fathom. If you hold on just a little longer, you'll find that the outcome is more beautiful, more perfect than anything you could have orchestrated yourself. Which brings us to a critical point. What do we do once the waiting is over? Once the door finally opens, or even if it doesn't open the way we envisioned? That's where we face the calling within, then the suffering, the purpose behind the pain, the reason God never let your struggle go to waste. You see, once you step beyond the waiting, you realize your trial shaped you not just for yourself, but for others. And that's the final insight we need to explore tonight. Now, let's talk about the ultimate reason God doesn't let you suffer for no reason: to transform you into a vessel of hope for others. Your pain isn't just about you. Your journey is bigger than the confines of your own life. Let that sink in. Every tear you've shed, every valley you've crossed, can become a lifeline for someone else. Too often, we see our suffering as a personal burden, something to hide or be ashamed of. But in truth, your suffering can be the very thing that equips you to reach those who feel like no one understands. Because guess what? You do understand. You've been there. You've felt the sting of heartbreak, the ache of loneliness, the agony of a closed door. There's power in that understanding, a power that can heal, comfort, and inspire those who walk a similar path. Let me illustrate. I once knew a woman who battled breast cancer for years. The chemo, the surgeries, the constant fear. It pushed her to the brink. She emerged on the other side with scars she didn't want, pain she couldn't ignore. But instead of hiding those scars, she chose to share her journey, to speak openly about her moments of doubt and the nights she thought she wouldn't make it. And you know what happened? Other women found hope in her honesty. They looked at her and said, "If she can fight, so can I." That's the ripple effect of turning your suffering into someone else's survival guide. That's how God uses your pain to bring healing not just to you, but to the world around you. Now, imagine if she had stayed silent, if she had let shame or fear keep her story locked away. Countless individuals would never have found the encouragement they needed. And that's the danger of not embracing your story. You rob yourself and others of the breakthroughs that can come from shared experience. When you hold back, you might protect your pride, but you miss the opportunity to transform a life. That's a heavy responsibility, but it's also a grand privilege. You get to be the hands and feet, the voice and comfort that God uses to reach those who feel abandoned. What does that look like practically? It means being authentic about your journey. It means stepping into roles you never thought you'd fill. Maybe as a mentor, a speaker, a volunteer, a friend who listens without judgment. It means asking, who needs my story today? Who can benefit from the lessons I've learned? And sometimes the answer is right there in your own home, your own workplace, your own community. You don't have to cross oceans to make an impact. Start with the person in your immediate circle who's struggling with something you understand all too well. Of course, there's a flip side. If you choose to hoard your testimony, if you decide your pain was too personal, too ugly, or too shameful to share, You might never see the healing that comes when you let your scars breathe. You might remain stuck in the wound instead of embracing the wisdom. And that's a tragedy because God doesn't waste wounds. He heals them so they can heal others. Think of your scar not as a mark of defeat, but as a badge of survival, a symbol of grace that carried you through. Each scar has a story, and each story can ignite hope in someone who's lost all sense of direction. So how do you take that leap? You start small. You open up to someone you trust. You tell them what you've been through, not to gain pity, but to offer perspective. Notice how it feels to set your pain free, to let it serve a purpose bigger than itself. Over time, you'll find that sharing doesn't just help the listener. It helps you too. You reclaim your narrative. You look at your past suffering and say, Wes, it hurt, but it didn't destroy me. And now I can use it for good. That's power. That's redemption. That's God's plan in motion. Remember, your journey is unlike anyone else's. The details of your pain are unique, and so is your ability to reach a particular person, group, or community. Maybe you'll speak to 1,000 people on a stage, and consistency. Or maybe you'll sit across from a single mother in a coffee shop. The magnitude of the audience doesn't diminish the depth of the impact. Sometimes one conversation can create a ripple effect that changes generations. You never know how far your story will travel once it leaves your lips. And that, my friends, is why you haven't suffered for no reason. Your life experience, every wound, every tear, every lesson, carries the seeds of transformation for yourself and others. When you see that, when you embrace it, you realize your suffering is not a dead end, but a launch pad to a life brimming with purpose, compassion, and impact. Now, as we move into our conclusion, I want you to keep this in your heart. God has been refining you, teaching you to wait on His timing, and calling you to share the gift of your story. That is why you suffered. That is how your scars become sacred. Let's bring everything together. By now, you've heard me say it many times. God didn't let you suffer for no reason. He's been taking you through a journey of refinement, testing your faith, and revealing who you truly are beneath the surface. He's been teaching you the art of patience, asking you to trust that His timing, though it might feel excruciatingly slow, is always right on schedule. And ultimately, He's been writing a narrative that isn't just for you. It's for everyone around you who needs your story to light their own path. This is the big picture, the grand design that links all your tears, triumphs, and turning points into one breathtaking tapestry of purpose. We started tonight with the question, why? Why must we bear the weight of suffering? Why must we face heartbreak, disappointment, and uncertainty? The simplest answer is because you were made for more than comfort. You were made to grow, to learn, to elevate yourself and others. Pain is life's greatest teacher when we submit to its lessons. Nobody volunteers for suffering. Nobody lines up for hardship. But when it arrives, and it always does, your response determines whether that pain remains a boulder on your back or becomes a cornerstone in your foundation. Along the way, you discovered that suffering refines you like fire refines gold. It's painful, it's intense, and it can feel like it's never going to end. But if you hold steady, If you refuse to give in to despair, you emerge with a character that's unshakable. You begin to see glimpses of the person God intended you to be. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate. The illusions and the weaknesses get burned away, and what remains is a fortified version of you that no storm can topple. Then we moved into the waiting room, the place we often despise because it feels like God's ignoring our cries. But in that pause, God is orchestrating something bigger than we can see with our limited perspective. Waiting is the stage where trust is truly born. It's where you realize faith isn't just about believing in miracles. It's about holding on when no miracles are in sight. It's about walking forward when the road is dark and you only have a faint glimmer of light. Eventually, you find out that God was not just delaying you. He was aligning every necessary piece, building in you the strength, humility, and readiness to steward the blessings that come your way. Without the wait, you wouldn't know how to appreciate or handle what you've been praying for. Finally, we addressed the calling hidden within your suffering, the realization that your story isn't just for your personal growth. It's a beacon for those stumbling in a darkness you once knew. When you lift the veil on your pain and share the raw, unedited version of your journey, you give permission for others to believe that hope is real. You become a living testimony that says, I've been there and I made it out, and so can you. That's the ultimate gift your suffering can offer, the power to inspire, to comfort, to guide. So where does that leave you now? It leaves you at a crossroads. You have a choice. You can let your suffering define you as a victim, someone who can't move past their wounds, someone who uses pain as a reason to stay in the shadows, or you can let your suffering propel you into your destiny. Someone who says, Wes, it was hard. Yes, it hurt. But I'm still standing, and I refuse to let this pain be for nothing. When you choose the latter, you step into a life of purpose. You stop merely existing and start living with clarity and conviction. You realize you carry a message inside you that someone, somewhere desperately needs to hear. This is your call to action. Don't keep that message locked away. Don't bury the lessons your pain has taught you. Make a decision tonight, right now, that you will use every tear, every scar to speak life into the world around you. That could mean volunteering at a local shelter, mentoring a troubled youth, writing a book, starting a podcast, or simply opening your heart to a friend who's on the brink of giving up. The format doesn't matter, the intention does. Your story holds a unique power. Don't underestimate what God can do with your willingness to share it. And remember, none of this is to suggest you'll never suffer again. Life is an ongoing tapestry of challenges and triumphs. But once you grasp that your suffering has purpose, it changes how you approach every new storm. You face it with the knowledge that you've been forged in fire before, and you can be forged again. You stand taller, confident in the God who never wastes your tears. You realize that each challenge is shaping you, preparing you, and yes, stretching you become an even greater force of light and hope. There is no room for despair in that revelation, because you understand you're part of something much bigger than your momentary pain. Let me ask you one final question. Are you ready to live like someone who believes God didn't let you suffer no reason? Are you prepared to embrace the fullness of that truth, to let it guide your actions, to let it inform your relationships, to let it shape your outlook? Because if you are, then you'll find yourself stepping into opportunities you never thought possible, serving in ways you never imagined, and reaching heights you never dared to dream. You'll find yourself living with a boldness that only comes from knowing that your scars are actually signs of your survival and your strength. So this is where we land, in a place of hope, a place of action, and a place of gratitude. Hope because you recognize that your suffering was never meaningless. Action because you refuse to let those lessons lie dormant. Gratitude because you see how each struggle was a stepping stone, each tear a seed of empathy, each hardship a building block of wisdom. You look up and say, "Thank you, God, for guiding me through the fire and into the light." And as we close, I want you to hold on to this: your story isn't over. In fact, it may be just beginning. You have chapters yet unwritten, relationships yet formed, victories yet won. Let the knowledge that your past suffering has purpose ignite the path forward. Open your heart, lift your head, and walk forward with courage and conviction. Because God didn't let you suffer for no reason. And that means there's a reason you're still here, still breathing, still fighting, and still dreaming. Go out and live that reason. Embrace it. Share it. Let it become the spark that sets your entire life ablaze with meaning. The world needs your testimony, your resilience, your unwavering hope. That's why you endured. That's why you overcame. That's why your best days are still ahead. Now it's your turn to take what you've learned and shine like never before. And I promise you, when you do, you'll see that the darkest nights of your life have made way for the brightest dawn. God didn't let you suffer for no reason. Believe it, live it, and watch the miracles unfold.